Coffee is for leaders.
From Joe Rogan on down to just some TikToker, right?
Mhm.
That is considered the creator economy, influencers. I think there's a difference between a podcaster with a more long form product and people making the real short form, quick hitting content. But at the end of the day, look, I think the tide has already shifted heavily towards that because people, especially under 40, are mostly consuming that content. They really don't care that much about legacy media, so to speak.
Clark, thank you so much for coming on the show. It's great to meet you and connect with you. You are the CEO of Ranker. Maybe let's just start with how you became the CEO of Ranker and what Ranker is.
Sure. Yeah. So I'm a lifelong entrepreneur. I'm 57 years old at this point. So I've been starting businesses from before the .com era, when I was starting businesses, they weren't called startups as much as they were just called small businesses, right? And just sort of jump ahead into the Ranker era. I had a prior in the 1.0 internet era. I had a company called eCrush that was sort of an up and down in that crazy early internet thing that had its ups and downs, but had a nice little exit, and we never raised much money to Hearst. So this was right at the beginning of 2007 that happened. And I had always had this idea of, I love lists. I've always loved lists and rankings. And I had this idea of connected rankings where, the world is ranking everything. And that was the genesis of Ranker, which we launched a year and a half later. And, ranker.com has grown and grown over the years, and it's still a big website. We've collected 1.6 billion votes from people across 100,000 plus different rankings. So we really aim to provide sort of the definitive answer to what is the best blank. Now, we don't do local. It's mostly pop culture stuff. We found that was our wheelhouse, movies, TV, music, celebrities, stuff like that, food, fast food, things like that. And from that, we've also, we've got a lot of really interesting consumer sentiment data. It's not like personally identifiable, this exact person needs to be targeted with this exact ad. It's more like fans of X also like Y, they like Z, they like P and Q, and they hate X and W, right? So from Ranker, we've built some other products. We like anybody in the media space. We've got a number of YouTube channels. Biggest ones being Nerdstalgic and Weird History, and social media channels. We've got 60 plus million social followers across different platforms. But we've also built a TV recommender app called Watchworthy, and it's basically, what should I watch next? There's too much out there. We use all the Ranker data and the Watchworthy consumer data, and we're also branching out into sort of B2B support services, because if you, on your connected TV device, if you're getting really good recommendations, I'm surprised, because they still haven't really solved that problem years later. So that's our latest push, is having conversations with streaming services and TV manufacturers about using our data to provide better recommendations for anybody using a Hulu or a Paramount Plus or all those different services.
What's your sense for like the state of media right now? And I know that's a pretty broad question, but within your own what you do at Ranker and being like in a lot of ways a publisher, right?
Yeah.
And publishing, but even just generally, given that you're so engaged in that and even ranking a lot of that, what do you think the state of media is right now?
Honestly, it's one of those questions that doesn't have a single answer, because there's so many variants and different things going on in media. But media is changing even faster in the last few years than I sort of would have anticipated. Look, the internet has changed everything, but then social media, has accelerated the internet. It's a lot harder for publishers to get traffic, or maybe it's not for a little while because a new platform comes out and you start gaming that platform, but then something changes. The platform doesn't care if they send you traffic or not. They're just interested in, monetizing their audience and as best as they can. And then, of course, the biggest change, and this is really, it's been going on for 6-7 years, but I would say that in the last 2 years, it's been the biggest change has been the influencer economy, where media organizations don't have as much. An influencer can just be an individual, and obviously, you can be working with a support group that helps you sell your ads or do whatever, but media is going through a lot of pain, frankly, because of that. And I could talk a lot about the recent Zuckerberg kind of things and whatnot, but that would eat up the whole podcast if you wanted to hear my opinions about that. It is, let's just say this. If I was starting out fresh, I would not be like starting a media company would not be my first pick.
Why is that? Just because it's so decentralized and you're reliant so much on these huge platforms?
Yeah, I mean, a platform makes an algorithm change and your traffic can go overnight, and boom, your revenues. I mean, we've seen that. We're a solid 8-figure revenue company, but we've had algorithm. If you go on Google these days, AI answers dominate the top of the search page, and our there's a, like, let's just say there's a ranker list that ranks number 3 for a search. We've done some analysis, and some of our content is doing about 30% of the traffic for the same ranking that it did 4 years ago. So that's AI and ads and other garbage, or maybe not, right? Some of the AI, it's not all bad, but there's a term that you might have to bleep out that you've probably heard from Cory Doctorow called the enshittification of big technology. And that is absolutely impacting, your Facebook experience, your Google experience, and everything. And I would say that none of that helps media companies. It may help individuals who are creators, but it does not generally help media companies who are trying to create quality content.
Yeah, I think that's right. And yeah, you mentioned Zuck just recently came out and said like he's changing the algorithm again in some way to try to be more free speech.
Yeah, there's algorithm changes happening every week, and like something that would have gotten this much traffic gets 5x all of a sudden, or 1/5 all of a sudden. Like, it's happening weekly, and it's strange. It's like you can't really. You have no agency or control. You're just kind of, oh, look what happened. So that's not fun to run a business when you have no control, right? As somebody who's interviewing CEOs and entrepreneurs all the time, we're control freaks, right?
Yeah.
I mean, what entrepreneur is not a control freak, right? So that's why I would not choose media if I was starting something else. But
yeah, to be able to own your own audience and stuff like that and not have it owned by it really is interesting. And I wonder what you think of this. I often think of this, maybe like once a month. I wonder if like 20, 30 years from now, we're going to be like, hey, why did we work for Zuckerberg and Elon and like put all this effort into building up their platforms and their revenue? Like, it really is quite interesting. And I mean, there's obvious reasons why we do that, because that is where everyone is. But, all those who work for, or build these media companies are really just working for them.
Oh, I mean, everything that I'm saying, if you take, I don't know, NBC or Paramount or somebody, they feel exactly the same way in a slightly from a different lens, but it's still the same thing. It's like, what happened? We've lost the attention game, and I don't think you're talking 20 years from now. I think you're talking 2-3 years from now. I really do think there's sort of a reckoning. But I think it's going to be more of a consumer reckoning, because I think people are frustrated with consumers are frustrated with the platforms, and but the hard part is just they have so much power, right? There's really not, it's going to take a real sea change. And look, I don't want to sit and talk about AI because it's not an expertise of mine. I mean, we use AI, but I'm not like one of these gurus about it. But even just the AI stuff this week, right, that we've seen just rocketing the NASDAQ and whatever. Like, this is a time of crazy disruption, and disruption is cuts every cuts every way, but it cuts.
Yeah, the DeepSeek stuff is fascinating, and completely changes the entire paradigm of how we were once thinking of AI. And it's interesting, it comes on the heels of like this huge announcement of like $500 billion in data centers and stuff, and it's just like,
You
what is
can't keep
going on?
up with the news that's happening
Yeah,
so fast. It's crazy.
it's wild. I want to touch on something real quick that you mentioned before, which is this whole influencers and their role, an outsized role, and how like they're more popular than standard media. Like, for example, Joe Rogan, top podcast in the world, probably, like he's bigger than CNN, MSNBC, Fox combined. Like, it's crazy. Do you see that as like where the future of media is going? And or like what were you meaning when you said influencers?
Yeah, that from Joe Rogan on down to just some TikToker, right?
Mhm.
That is considered the creator economy, influencers. I think there's a difference between a podcaster with a more long form product and people making the real short form, quick hitting content. But at the end of the day, look, I think the tide has already shifted heavily towards that because people, especially under 40, are mostly consuming that content. They really don't care that much about legacy media, so to speak. I don't think it's a positive necessarily. Like literally, I'll tell you that the reason I started Ranker, and this is long before influencers, but there were lists all over the web, but it was always like one blogger's opinion of the top 20 blah blah. And who's this guy? This is just somebody making trying to make $50 on traffic to his blog post, right? Like there's no authority there, but Google was ranking it high, and that's what people are seeing. So I said I'm going to fix that with crowdsourced rankings and deliver the definitive answer to whatever is asked in a list format. And we've done that, but to me, that's a better quality piece of information. But does a 22-year-old scrolling on their TikTok think that way? I don't know. It's a lot of change, and I do not think the creator economy trend. I love the fact that it democratizes things, and the gatekeepers aren't there saying this is what makes sense. But it's also like, well, look, I started my career in the record industry, right, and that's another place that's been totally disrupted. And there was a value in gatekeepers kind of knowing like this is the music that's really good, and now with everybody on Spotify making something, it's a little bit harder to really make popular music that crosses over and isn't just lowest common denominator. And the same thing is happening, I think, on the creator economy in a sort of different consumption way.
Yeah, I agree with that. And then, if like we're seeing again, like recent news is like TikTok may or may not exist. And like all these types of, like if you've built, millions and millions of followers there, and all of a sudden the fact that these platforms can be turned off and, their algorithms can be changed is pretty wild.
Yeah, I don't think that government thinking and I just don't think anybody has a clue how to deal with algorithms. Yet they control our lives, right? They dictate what we see, and in some cases choose to do. And nobody would have envisioned that or has any idea how to handle it, really. From a societal perspective. So, look, it's a fascinating time to be in the middle of all this, and I learn something every day. But it isn't always the funnest time to actually try to grow a business in a normal way because the rug gets pulled out from you very quickly.
Have you ever like ranked CEOs or gone
Yeah.
into the business world on like ranking? That'd be interesting.
Yeah, the problem that we've had with Ranker and that kind of thing is two. One is I never had enough. I never raised I raised venture capital money, but it was always like seed level money. Never had more than $2 million to play with at a time. So you'd have to rank CEOs. Like we used to have venture capitalists always saying like, isn't there a ranking of VCs? And I'm like, because I don't have the young people making content for me don't know what VCs are, even let alone what VCs are good or whatever. And so I could hire somebody and do that just to raise my next round from you people because you're so myopic. But that's not what I set out to build, right? So we've actually we found that when you try to do something that's I guess very highly susceptible to gaming, you also find that the bad actors come in right away. Like if we were ranking CEOs, those CEOs would get their publicists try to come in and send everybody to vote on. Would the answer be good at the end of the day? I don't know. I doubt it.
That's a good point. That's a good point. Yeah, the business world is very gamed. people probably don't know that. I also wonder, you're talking about AI a little bit. How has it changed your workflow at Ranker? How has it changed everything and what you do? Has it made it easier, faster?
I will say this, so Ranker is we're a lot sort of more robust than like a WordPress kind of publisher. We actually have ingested 30 million entities in our system to rank so that they can be on any list very quickly. And so an entity kind of needs a little synopsis, right? An entity could be a TV show, a TV episode, it could be a celebrity, it could be a baseball player, and you need a little blurb about that entity. So AI is really helpful for things like that, because writing blurbs about these things, it's costly at scale, and AI really does help us on those fronts, as long as you still have an editor who, can kind of, let's put it this way, writing a little synopsis could take an editor 15 minutes. With the assist of AI, it could take that person maybe 2 minutes, but it still isn't good to just let the AI do it all. We have not found that the AI is high quality enough, even with the really good prompt training, to just replace everything. So human assisted AI, I'm a big believer in right now, and I do think that the technology will get better. I don't think I'm not one of those AI true believers who thinks it can replace everything, but I think it can really be a productivity gain of, I would say, the sort of repetitive, kind of less nuanced task.
What does a typical day look like for you?
I'm a dashboard guy, right? So I'm not like a trained analyst. I have a great analyst who's our COO. But I love just like looking at numbers, because at the end of the day, I guess for better or for worse, because our industry is so rapidly changing, my day is I would say an hour or two of every day is sort of spent just like, what's going on? Is there something to optimize here with this traffic source? Or maybe the sales team is pitching over here and we need to give them some better data to do that pitch with, or whatever it may be. So it starts with dashboards, and I would say, rather than a typical day, I kind of think of a typical week. I try to be, I'm kind of like hands-on or hands-off, depending on my team and what they're working on. So I have to get into the weeds every once in a while on something that's just, something circles back around that I'm the one who commissioned to build 6 years ago, and all of a sudden becomes a thing again, and I'm the one who has to go into the weeds and deal with it. And then in a lot of other cases, I'm just taking half-an-hour meetings with my leads and getting the summary from them. So it's really just a weird combination of like, what are the priorities? I try to avoid standing meetings, for more than 25% of my week, because I like to call meetings on short notice when need be. And I think that any CEO who's spending, 70% of their time in meetings, at least for companies like ours, 100-person-ish companies, I don't know, like, to me, that's
That sounds miserable. That sounds, and it also sounds like probably something that you shouldn't be doing.
Yeah, unless your business is very straightforward and isn't subject to a lot of change, in which case, more power to you, right?
Yeah, for sure. How do you think about hiring and culture and building that culture?
Well, hiring, we again, this might be bleeped out, but I've always kind of I'm a Midwesterner, and although the company's based in LA, we really have always strove to hire grounded people. We've had what I call a no douchebag policy. Like, we just don't want hypey hustler type people who just, you have to then follow up on all the time and say, why didn't you do what you said you're going to do, right? So we really have just kind of found people across the board from the get-go, and this sort of answers your culture question as well. Ranker's about kind of, whether it's Ranker or the Watchworthy TV app, it's still kind of nerdy, right? It's like, you got the pop culture aficionados who really are like, I'm making lists, I'm making rankings, I'm like, they love that they're doing that for a job. So we really seek out people. In some cases, we've hired from our community. We've hired a bunch of freelance writers who started for us as freelancers and ended up as full-time content creators. And the commonality is honestly just like grounded people who are really bright, but might be a little nerdy.
I love it. That's incredible. What are like some products or apps or something like that you just can't live without that you use every day?
I'll give you one that I feel like is unsung, although I don't read a lot of like B2B press, so maybe you're familiar with it. Have you heard of Loom?
Yeah. Yeah. Loom's great.
I think that is just the most like once I got Loom, I used to do voice memos all the time, right? It's faster to say something than write something. So I'd be emailing people voice memos left and right. But with Loom, especially when you're working in digital media and you can just like share your screen and just say, move that thing over there, that Loom is the, I would say it saves me a half an hour a day. And I can't think of any other tool released in the last 5-10 years that has done that.
That's a good answer. What do you think from like we're going in, it's 2025, we're in the first month of it. How are you thinking about this year from an economic standpoint, from an advertising standpoint, like everything that you're focused on versus last year? You think it's going to be the same, different, better?
I've kind of gotten to a place where I've been wrong too many times when I've tried to predict that. Look, Trump's doing a lot of really fast, crazy things, and who knows where that's going to go. It could be a very big economic positive. It could be a short-term economic positive that changes to a negative quickly. We really don't know. I will say that our one of the KPIs that we just have to look at is sort of broad broad advertising, and then it trickles down into broad digital media advertising. And we've actually seen some very positive, I would say starting in the second half of last year, we have been just seeing just better ad dollars overall. And I thought at first, it's an Olympics thing, right? Like there's always weird macro ad spends around big worldwide events, but it's continued on through that. So as of now, I'm somewhat bullish, but I've been wrong every time I've thought about that in the past. So I think anybody listening to this should pretty much ignore me on
that. Finally, we end every interview with the same question, and that is at CEO.com. We believe the chances one gives is just as important as the chances one takes. When you hear that, who gave you a chance to get you to where you are today?
I think this is a little bit cheesy, but I'm going to say that I really only worked in a corporate capacity for a few years before I went off on my own, and I was working at record labels, so it wasn't the most corporate gig to begin with, and I think that the fact that my parents, especially my father was a corporate guy, right? He worked for AT&T, which was before that it was Illinois Bell, and it was and he was a 60-hour a week grinded out kind of corporate guy, and he basically kind of said, listen, I will make sure that since I'm seeing my son wanting to be an entrepreneur and go off on his own, I will back you with it, not just from the perspective of you have my blessing, but also like if things go wrong, I can provide some financial backstop for a little while. And honestly, I didn't have a lot of money when I started my first businesses, and I had at one point in time I had 4 businesses going at once, and so it's kind of cheesy to say that, but I know a lot of people find that their parents have these high expectations of them to follow in certain footsteps. And my father was kind of the opposite. He was just like, I was a corporate guy and I didn't like that. And I liked it for a long time until it ended. And then I got early retired and I couldn't do another gig. So I really want you to go out and do what you want to do and be your own boss and be your own boss. That's the, please be your own boss, right? Was kind of the thing that he drummed into me. So a little cheesy to say your dad, but I'm going to say my dad.
Are you kidding? It's perfect. I love it. That's the answer that everybody wishes they could say is their dad or their mom. It's wonderful. Clark, thank you so much for coming on. Congratulations on everything you built. And yeah, it really means a lot to have you here.
Thanks for having me. And thanks everybody for watching.